Okay. I guess briefly explain any hands-on experience you have with hydrofracking. Oh, and look this way, not towards the
Okay.
camera.
Well, I personally don't have any experience like hands-on with fracking. My husband is a engineer, and so I'm more on the environmental side, but I don't necessarily focus on oil and gas when it comes to environmental initiatives, sustainability. I TA environmental or energy policy courses, and I also take energy courses, and so because environmental science is so interdisciplinary, that's a subset of what I do, but I'm not as hands-on involved with fracking.
Okay, so you probably, I mean, I already know, but do you directly support hydrofracking?
I have mixed feelings about fracking because I think that you have to be practical about your if you're a scientist and you think things out, you realize that the lights are on right now. You realize that I got in my car and I drove here today, so I'm using fossil fuels all the time, and it's unreasonable to think that you're not going to use fossil fuels. So I understand the environmental impact about it, and I'm concerned, and I think there's ways to mitigate that environmental impact without being a radical about oil and gas in general. I think that there's my highest concern when it comes to oil and gas or natural gas and fracking is the water usage, because in places like West Texas we don't have an abundance of water. We barely have water to take care of the people living within the city limits or even on the outside, and we also are a large farming community, and so much of the water is already being used for cotton farming. So I can't justify in my mind how can you decide to do fracking in areas where you don't have the water to do so because it's so water intensive. And my priority is taking care of humans' essential survival needs and then our creature comforts in terms of what we get from energy. So it's a two-sided coin, and I understand what's going on with that. So I'm not for or against. It's that I think there might be a better idea out there.
Okay. And do you see that idea coming up anytime in the near future?
I think I've been paying a lot more attention to what's going on with renewables in the last year or so, and I really think that wind is going to take off. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to replace natural gas, but I think that whenever we get to the point where it's harder and harder to attain resources from fossil fuels, instead of doing drastic things that are extremely expensive and very hard to drill out of the ground, we might be able to rely more on things like solar and wind. And I think wind is really getting a lot of people to invest in it, where there's a lot of government support for wind. And as long as those production tax credits stay, that are continually renewed, I think that we're going to see some really promising things come from wind. And so I don't think that we'll necessarily frack less, but we will need less foreign energy, so we'll be able to have more energy security and independence. And so that's a positive thing. Even if you're more concerned about the environmental impacts, the fact that you have more energy security is something that I think all of us Americans can get on board for. So
Do you see there being, this prodigal single answer to fossil fuels, or do you think that there's going to be a portfolio that replaces it?
I think there'll definitely be a portfolio. I think that some people would argue for nuclear, but nuclear is so there's just so much risk involved with nuclear. There's great arguments for, but there's also arguments against. For example, I'm from Inola, Oklahoma, which means Black Fox in Cherokee, and they were going to put in a Black Fox nuclear facility in my town. Well, it would have been great for the city. We would have gotten a ton of tax revenues. It would have, we had a state-of-the-art school, but the entire town was like, we don't really want this here because we're too concerned about the risk that could be associated with it. And it would have been, I guess I would have grown up with it my whole life and maybe not assessed the risk. But if you told me now that place would be built 2 miles from my parents' home, I'd be concerned. I know there's a lot of safety regulations put in place, but when it comes to the waste, it's just, I don't think that that's the answer either. And so I think it's definitely going to be a portfolio. And I think that there's a misconception that the technology isn't there. And I disagree with that conception, because I think that we are incredibly innovative individuals. We have a lot of really great ideas. It's the funding and the political willpower and the economic backing. But if money weren't an issue, then oil and gas wouldn't be something we had to speak so much about. We would say, well, it doesn't make sense to do something that emits so much carbon. It is labor intensive. It can be dangerous. You have to pull a resource from the ground. It's limited. So money at the end of the day is what the issue is.
Do you think the U.S. will be the first country to reach this portfolio, or do you think that
I think China will.
Yeah.
I think that they have more control of their political situation, more autonomy, so they can enforce that on their people. And I mean, and that's a two-sided argument. You say, well, if climate change is as big of an issue as many climatologists believe, let's say the worst of the worst is coming, well, people would probably argue the government should step in and tell us do what's best for us, But at the same time, we hold those values of democracy and being able to say, I want to be represented and I want my opinion to be involved, in my personal well-being right now is more important to me than what could happen in terms of climate change, because maybe I don't understand the science of climate change. And so that's part of the beauty of the kind of country we live in. We like it that way. We don't want an authoritative government to tell us what to do, but at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, like, what would really be better when we're looking at what we're going to look like in 100 years from now. So only time will tell, because we're not giving up democracy anytime soon. But I think for those reasons, China will surpass us. And they already have, where we don't have a comprehensive energy policy, China already has goals for like 2050 to be at certain levels. And I think that they're more likely to achieve it than we are.
Right. Anything I missed? Anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
Alrighty. That should do it.